It's all your fault. Look at all you awesome people here. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
So we had this is our first time up to Sacramento, and you guys came out in droves, and I tell you how much I really appreciate it. It's fantastic. It makes me feel unworthy, humble, and really appreciate it because, you know, this is the 30th year of the Turtles. I've had a lot of work on it. So it's kind of cool that today, well, not only is it the 30th anniversary of the Turtles were originally created in Dover, New Hampshire in 1983. Peter and I did the first sketches together and then worked on the original comic book. But in May of 1984 is when the first Turtle comic came out. So May of this year is going to be officially 30 years. What's super cool about today, amongst everything else I get to share with you guys, is I did a voice for the new Turtles animated show. What? I'll tell you something. But it's funny because it premiered today at 11 o'clock this morning. I pulled a few strings, I did it just for you guys. No, that was actually pretty cool. But I played this, my good friend Ciro Neely, who's the, it's funny, he's the executive producer of the show. And what's so cool about Ciro is his dad owned a pizza parlor when he was growing up in Philadelphia. He loved Turtles, he loved comics, he loved reading and dragged his mom to all the Turtle movies, and made her buy all those Turtles things. And here he is all this time later, now he's the executive producer on the show, and what's even cooler is he's sort of picking out his favorite things out of 30 years of Turtles and putting them into the show. So you're going to see a lot of new characters, a lot of characters he created, but a lot of homage to original characters that he's created. He loved in the original series, the original black and white series, the animated series, some of the movies. So if you haven't seen the show, I think it's fantastic. I really love it. And so he started asking me about a year or so ago, because I go in and I work with the guys on the show, and he asked me to do a voice. And I said, if I do a voice in the show, I want it to be kind of like what George Clooney did on South Park. I want it to be like a dog or something crazy. And so my wife and I, this is Courtney, we are part of Team Eastman. My wife Courtney and I were at San Diego Comic-Con last year, and he was flipping through the slideshow of some of the new characters that they're developing. And he showed this cat, which was his homage to the Michelangelo Christmas Story, where Peter and I introduced a cat named Clunk. And so he wanted to include a cat in the series. And so Michelangelo gets this, April finds a cat, gives it to Michelangelo, and the cat accidentally eats some ice cream with some mutagen in it, and he becomes Ice Cream Kitty. So I stood up in the middle of Comic-Con and said, that's it, that's what I want to be, Ice Cream Kitty. And they thought I was kidding, so we kept bugging him for about 6 months. I said, dude, you do not give Ice Cream Kitty to anybody else who's going to be Ice Cream Kitty. So we went up a couple weeks ago and recorded the voice, and the show premiered today, so it's super awesome. So. Well, I tell you, it's funny that since Peter and I did the first drawings of the Turtles, and we didn't think we'd sell one single copy of issue 1. Again, your fault for buying them, thank you. We never even thought of doing a second issue when we started back in Dover, New Hampshire, back in 1983 and 84 and 85. And then when we started working on the success of the comics, then we started working on the animated series and the toys. And I have to tell you, I don't think, even while we were doing it, we wanted, Peter and I had full control over our characters, because we created them, we wrote them, we owned them, and we weren't going to let anybody do anything with our characters that we didn't want to see done with them. So when we worked on the animated show, it was really fun because the original black and white series was done for a much older audience. It was edgier, a little bit grittier, and the way we wanted to see comic books. And so when we started working on the animated series, we specifically were writing it for a younger audience. So we were able to include more humor in the series. We were able to do things like, Peter had the idea to have each of the Turtles have a different colored bandana, which was a really cool thing, makes the individual personality stand out even more. But when we worked on the first 5 episodes, these are never going to make it on the air. This is just too bizarre. You look at all the cartoons that were out there. And when the first cartoon show aired in 1987, Christmas break of 87, the ratings were huge. Your fault. And thank you. And we started working on the rest of the series, so it was kind of fun to develop this whole line of our characters for a younger audience and kids, and that was a blast. And my favorite part is, the show comes out in 1987, and the toys came out in June of 1988. And I remember quite clearly, as my favorite story is, back when KB Toy Stores was the toy store. So Pete and I, we lived in, we moved back to Massachusetts at this time. So we go to the local KB store down in Springfield. As we're kind of walking down the aisle where the action figures are, this mom is dragging her little son out of the action figure aisle and said, "No, I'm not buying you one of those stupid Ninja Turtles." And we were like, "Oh my God, what have we done?" And then, you know, man, the toys sold out. It's funny because Peter and I used to do a lot of signings together, and the signings were really a little bit different than they are today, because the signings we did in the old days, there would typically be a young fan and an incredibly ticked off parent behind them with this look on his face, like, or her face, going, "Do you know how many turtle blimps I bought trying to put together Christmas Eve? And do you remember how many sewer play sets I had to buy and how much I've shelled out for those turtles?" And so we thank them profusely again. But it's, so that was kind of cool. And again, you know, this is going back now, you know, 25 years. And what's so cool about today is, angry fan. It wasn't me, it was him. And so today it's really cool because now Turtles are officially 30 years old, so a lot of young persons that were fans of the Turtles originally have grown up and they have kids and families of their own. So the shows are like, you know, a mom or dad and a son or daughter coming to the shows, and now they're both fans of the Turtles, so it's kind of generational, and that's really even more flattering. I mean, you know, if you'd have told me, and actually told my parents I was going to move out of the basement when I was growing up drawing cartoons all the time, to still be here talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 30 years later, it's just, like I said, it's humbling and it's fantastic. I'm super, super, super appreciative. This is a really, I started saying this is the 30th anniversary of the Turtles, so it's been really fun that, you know, 3 or 4 years ago I started working on the new Turtle movie. Actually, this August will be 3 years I started working on the IDW comic series. I don't know if you guys see the IDW series. You know, that was also cool because when we started working on the IDW series, I hadn't been fully engaged in the Turtles as, you know, writing and drawing since Peter and I used to do it. I think the last Turtle comic book I did was with Simon Bisley in 1996, and it was a crazy over-the-top violent story, body count. And so to me it was like when I met with Tom Walsh, who really deserved all the credit, much like Ciro did with the new animated series. Ciro picked all of his favorite parts of the Turtles' 25-year history. Tom grew up as a fan of the Turtles, and he picked his favorite parts of the black and white series and the animated series and stuff, and sort of recreated this new Turtles universe where we can kind of pick and choose different characters and different stories we wanted to tell. And again, IDW called me up, my old friend Ted owns IDW, and he said, "You want to come down and see what we're doing for the new Turtle comic series? Maybe you can do a few covers." And it was amazing because when they started laying out what they wanted to do for a storyline, I got like really, really, really excited. You know, I love the Turtles. I've always loved the Turtles. The Turtles have been such a huge part of my life. You guys have given me the best job in the entire universe. And so when they said this is what we want to do in the new series, I actually realized, one, how much I love them and how much I miss them and how much I couldn't wait to start drawing them again. And so I worked, now I've done 35 covers. I did a Turtles annual last year that came out, which was a 60-page story. And out of the entire history of the Turtles, I've never done a story that big and that long all by myself, and so that was fantastic to do that. And you know, much like with the new cartoon series, when IDW launched a new comic series, you guys came out and started buying this stuff again. So again, you've given me a great job, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm actually working on a new Turtles annual now, which Bobby, the lead editor at IDW, is going to kill me because it's going to be about a month late. I'm just slow. You've seen the lines. I mean, it's like trying to do these sketches, and I love it. It touched me. It's like if I could draw all day, and I often do, I love it, and try to get to each and every one of you. And I want to make sure that, you know, we don't let anybody leave without a signature or a chance to say hi or a picture and that stuff. But we'll work hard. But we've got a 7-year-old waiting for us, so we're gonna have to shoot out of here tonight. So another big thing that's happening in the 30th anniversary of the Turtles, 2014, is we have a new movie coming out. And I know that you've read a lot of stuff in the trades and the press, and it's like, oh my God, babe, what a jerk. And I just want to make sure that I had a chance to get out and share my experience on the series, because I started working with the original series producers 3 years ago in the movie. And when Michael Bay and Jonathan Eastman came in, the story that they wanted to tell, the writers that they wanted to tell, they really were very concerned about messing with the franchise and messing with what we grew up with, the Turtles. I mean, that's, to me, the best superhero movie I've ever seen is The Avengers. I mean, Joss Whedon, the movie was so perfect I practically wept. I mean, that was the stuff that I was reading when I was a kid. And so we know what it's like if somebody comes in, especially Hollywood comes in and messes with the characters that we've grown up our whole lives with and that we love and want to continue to love and not hate Michael Bay. And but I've seen the script, I've seen the character designs. I have a cameo in the film. I'm doing my Stan Lee thing. No, but I have an awesome cameo in the film. And it's coming out, I think, August 8th. This is the latest date, but I think you're going to be really happy. I think you're going to be,
Where's the trailer?
So back here. Oh, the movie trailer. Sorry. No, actually, I was surprised. I thought they were going to have it out by now, but I think that they're.
I think it's going to premiere with Captain America. That's what I heard.
Oh, no kidding. That's Winter Soldier. When's that? March? April. That's too long. That's way too long. So, but yeah, the movie is it's going to be a lot of things exploding. No, it's going to be good. I think you'll be really happy with it, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun. So let me see. Why don't we do some questions? We actually we prepared a whole slideshow and stuff like that, but we came unprepared. We didn't bring the rest of the stuff with us. But I can kind of spitball and do this stuff. But I sort of given you some origins, what's going on this year, and what's coming up later this year. So if you guys have specific questions on the Turtles, why don't you start wherever. Just get a hand up first.
Yeah. Will there ever be another tabletop RPG?
Yeah.
Man, I hope so, because that was, it's funny because the tabletop RPG, that was one of the first things that Peter and I licensed back in the day. Palladium Books did an awesome job. Back in the days when Peter and I still had time to still do drawings and work on the concept and stuff like that. We loved it. So, it's tough because I know that, it's one of those, I call it an art form, which I think is back stronger than it's ever been. So I think if we can get that on Nickelodeon's radar, then hopefully they'll do something, because I think it'd be a lot of fun. So, thanks. Any more there?
First of all, thank you for creating my childhood.
Thank you very much.
Me and my son's lives. I have 2 boys, and they absolutely love these Turtles, just because of me. And I did have a question for you. Is the pizza? Where does the pizza come from?
In high school, I worked in a pizza place, and I still eat a lot of pizza. Find a gym again. But no, all through high school, I worked at a pizza place in Westbrook, Maine, where I grew up, and it was one of those things. I love pizza, and it's like when you start with a concept that's as silly as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, even when we came up with the names for the characters themselves, we said, well, this idea is so crazy and so goofy. We could have traditional Asian names, but that didn't seem to be funny enough. And we could have traditional American names, and that didn't seem funny enough. And I grew up as a huge art history fan. In fact, the last my graduating year of high school, 1980, class of '80, and we go Blazers. No, we did. I did this huge mural in my high school of my homage to Leonardo da Vinci, and so I just threw this out to Pete when we were sitting bantering in our little Mirage Studios, and the name Mirage Studios came from, we didn't actually have a studio, it was our living room, so it was a Mirage. So I said, names like blah, 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 well, how about Leonardo da Vinci, Leonardo, Michelangelo, and actually funny is that Donatello was almost named Bernini, because Bernini was my favorite sculptor from that time period. Peter was like, no, let's do one that ends in an O, and so Donatello, who was also awesome as a sculptor. But so it's fantastic. And I forgot the rest of your question. Was there something that you asked, and then I tend to drift sometimes, but
The pizza.
oh, and the pizza. I eat a lot of pizza. Actually, the best job I had at that time when we were working on the first issue of the Turtles is I worked night shift at a local hotel. So it's like I'm basically checking a few people late at night, then I'd have the whole night to draw. That's awesome. Now I draw for a living. It's even more awesome. So. Gentleman right there, the hand up.
Due to the recent passing of James Avery, voice of Shredder, what was he like to work with?
He was fantastic. Thanks for bringing that up. He was, he'll be sadly missed. I mean, we worked with interestingly enough, I hadn't seen him in a number of years since the original series, and some friends of mine from Canada are making this incredibly awesome turtle history documentary. I really think it's I saw a cut of it. They've been working on it for about 5 years. It's one of those documentaries that's not full of, fluff and, selling something. It's like they actually go in and made it for fans. They're fans themselves, they made it for fans. And one of the things that they did when they were in California is the house I lived in, we got to get all the original voice talent, including James Avery, Rob Paulson, and so many other people, got to come over to the house, and so we hung out for half a day and, just do Shredder again, do Shredder asking for a pretzel, But no, he was fantastic, and he was a real gentleman, and he'd be greatly missed. Thanks for bringing that up. Young lady?
Which slogan do you like better, Booyaka Shot or Cowabunga?
It's like, I think Cyril's getting enough pressure that they're gonna put Cowabunga back in the series, just as they have to. It's like, but it was sort of like, when Cyril took his first pass on developing the characters, even, if you notice the design of the characters, if you looked at the original covers of like Turtles #1, they had the kind of the wider legs and, skinnier bodies. I kind of ended up drawing them more muscular later on. But so he sort of hit the reset button and went back to some of the original concept designs. And Cowabunga didn't come until the animated series, and so it wasn't really the original comic series. So when Cyril started working on it, he was a big fan of Ali G, Sacha Baron Cohen, I guess he made Ali G, and he used to say that. So that was one of Cyril's own things, and I think it's pretty cool. But a lot of fans said, bring back Cowabunga, and you'll see that. So you please.
Okay. Okay. I have two.
We'll get to everybody.
Okay, I have two. One is since your idea's been interpreted by so many different people, is there one you favor the most that's been done by someone else?
That's a tough question and a good one. She asked if there's been so many versions of the Turtles, do I have one that's my favorite? And a couple things, I guess, when Peter and I grew up reading comic books, one of the things that we were used to seeing was lots of different art teams working on some of our favorite characters. Some we liked, back in those days, some we liked less, some we liked more. And so it was a very normal thing when we started doing the comic books that we'd have different artists coming in and working on the Turtle comics, especially when we were developing the animated show and working on the toys. We get less and less time to keep a regular schedule. And to us, it was always interesting that what different artists that we admired and respected, ideas that they saw in our character that we never saw. So they'd say like, oh, I love how you did this in the series and that in the series. And they're reading more into it and like, we did? Oh, that was no. But they did have their own sort of take on our characters, which was pretty flattering and fascinating. But out of all the series, it was great to work with the writers that we worked on the animated series, the comic series, and then when we get to the movies, hands down, I guess I would say if I had to point to one favorite version of the Turtles, it'd be the first Turtle movie, because it was great. We actually, it was fantastic. We were actually trying to get a director's cut of that out there sometime this year, because Steve Barron, who worked on this original Turtle movie, you have Hollywood producers coming in and say, oh, we want to turn them into nuns or something. They want to do this and want to do that. And Steve Barron came in and he had bought one of the original 500-page black and white collections of all the original series stories that Peter Laird and I did, and he had gone through and postmarked his favorite scenes and his favorite plot lines out of that story, and that's what then became the first movie. And then, if that wasn't cool enough, he brought Todd Langdon in to write the script, and the coolest part was getting to work with Jim Henson, who did the costumes, and that was really, seriously, it was fantastic, because if the Turtles didn't work on the big screen, then the whole thing wouldn't have worked. And I remember when Peter and I were developing, the look for the movie, Jim Henson's Creature Shop was in London, so we would get, FedExes and pictures, and they would send us stuff of everything they looked and some tests. But it wasn't until we went on the movie set in 1989, and I still remember Pete and I sort of walking from the front office down in Bloomington, North Carolina, where they filmed it, to the back lot, and you kind of, if you ever seen a Hollywood set, it's all like staging in the back, and then the facades are in the front, so you come around this corner, and all of a sudden you have New York City, brightest day lit. I mean, at night, it was shot at night. There was New York City in all its glory with all the lights, and standing over in the corner were all 4 Ninja Turtles like stretching, and one had a sombrero on, was dancing, and this thing just froze, and it was just, they had really come to life, and that was mind blowing. I still remember it like, yesterday. So.
And also, since there's a new Turtle show, will there be another Turtles Forever special?
The Turtles Forever. That was one of my favorite ideas that they'd done in a while, and that was when Peter and the guys were working on the last Fox Kids series, and I think they were getting ready to transition to Nickelodeon, and they came up with the idea to sort of combine all 3 universes, including the original black and white series. And they told me about it. They said, "Do you want to do a voice at the end like Peter and I did," which was awesome. And they said, "This is what the story's going to be." I'm like, dude, that's either going to be the most fantastic ever, or it's just going to totally not be any good. And it was fantastic. It was really, I thought they did a great job. It was really fun to be part of that. So, thanks. Casey.
Where did the character Casey Jones come from?
Great question. Casey Jones was an idea that I had. We'd done, I think, the first 3 issues, and we've been working on the 4th issue. And around that time in comic books, they had a very popular theme, which is these 4-issue micro-series. And I said, Pete, we need to do, because we're doing Turtles, it has to be a 1-issue micro-series, just 1 issue. And each issue would feature a different turtle, so you could get into their personality a little bit more. Again, we'd only done like 3 issues at that time. And another popular theme in comics at that time was vigilantes. Batman is more or less a vigilante, but each vigilante in comics had a really horrific story that tells how they got to be vigilantes. My whole family was murdered, my city was murdered, and so and I wanted to have a character that became a vigilante because he watched too much bad TV. And Pete used to watch, and I used to tease him relentlessly. Pete used to watch T.J. Hooker, the A-Team, all these shows that I was like, and so I had Casey watching 3 TVs at once, and he put together his own costume, which was stuff that he had in the closet. He was a hockey player, and so he had the mask and all that stuff. So I just had 2 bats, and I designed this basic rough sketch of it, and Pete goes, "You know what the character really needs is a golf bag," and with all kinds of different weapons in there. So I'm like, that's it. That became Casey. And so we did that first issue. We wanted Casey to be crazier than Raphael, so that Raphael that's what the story is called, Me, Myself, and I, is for Raphael for the first time to see someone even crazier than he is, and it sort of puts him in check a little bit. And that was the first thing we did with Casey, and then a couple years later, I saw one of my favorite John Carpenter movies, which is Big Trouble in Little China. And Kurt Russell's character in Big Trouble in Little China, that was like, that's my Casey Jones. So every time I've written Casey ever since then, it's always been with Jack Burton in mind. What would Jack Burton do? It was my thanks to John Carpenter, so thanks. Let's go to somebody over here. Go ahead.
What was it like seeing your characters dance with Vanilla Ice?
I'm leaving. No, what's funny is that when we did the first movie, around the time they were putting together the soundtrack for the first movie, they found a lot of really amazing recording artists to be on it, including MC Hammer before Can't Touch This, and Partners in Crime did that great Turtles rap song and all that stuff, and that was very, we're talking, my goodness, 20 some odd years now, and so we love the soundtrack. It fit the movie. Steve Barron, was most famous for, even before he did the first Turtle movie, he did, Michael Jackson's Billie Jean video and the Dire Straits' Money for Nothing video and the Aha video with the Take On Me, and he had this great visual sense, great sense of music. And so when they started working on the second movie, it was sort of like the director and the people that produced the movie did 2 things, in my opinion, and our opinion, I should say, my opinion anyway, is that they decided that the Turtles had to be less serious like they were in the first movie and make it more like a live-action cartoon. That's why you never saw them really use their weapons that much. What's that?
They didn't say damn anymore.
Oh my God.
No. So they made it sillier, and they just basically said, we're putting together the soundtrack right now, let's pick out the biggest name, and he was really popular at that time. And if you read the script and saw the movie, you'd be like, what we kind of were initially, which was what happened And then that whole scene with Vanilla Ice wasn't my favorite scene. It's nothing against Mr. Is it Van Winkle, Rob Van Winkle? I'm sure he's a great person and fine, and but yeah, just not my cup of tea.
At 5, it was awesome.
At 5, it was awesome. Well, so we also did the Turtles live tour, which is like, oh my goodness, that was out of our shell tour, which was a great idea. So I remember going to first time I go to Radio City Music Hall is to see the Turtles live. I think they still had the shells on at that time. It was the first opening night, and they had actual turtles passing out left and right because of the costume. But yes, back over here, and then we'll go to you. That's okay.
Shredder. I wanted to know because he died in the first issue.
Yes.
I wanted to know what made you guys bring him back, and what was the nostalgia of Shredder? What made you bring him back and put him into the actual series again?
The comic series, right?
Huge villain.
Well, that was, it's funny and it's tough to do. When Pete and I did the first issue, we said that, we're not going to be one of those, typical comic books, characters that always brings back the same bad guy again and again. So we did that. But we stayed away for, we never thought there'd be a second issue. We never thought you guys would buy the first issue. And we came up with the idea for Turtles 2. We added Baxter Stockman and the Evil Scientist and the Mausers. We added April O'Neil. And then we started developing more of the Turtles' backstory, because a lot of you know that read comic books. A lot of the Turtles' origin is based on Daredevil's origin. That was my favorite part of Daredevil, is that when, in the comic series, when young Matt Murdock got hit in the head with a canister that made him blind and made him Daredevil, they never said what happened to the canister. So that's, Pete and I took that, had it continue bouncing down the street and smashed this bowl of turtles. This kid just happened to be standing right over a sewer drain in the world of that's convenient. We then took them deeper than origin. We wanted to go out of space because Pete and I were both big, huge Star Wars fans. So at the end of Turtles 3, 4, 5, 6, and wrapping up at 7, we took them to outer space. And when we came back, we sort of hear Shredder in the background going, "Bring me back, bring me back." He was too cool of a character not to do something with it. So we came up with a plot line that brought it back in Turtles, starting in Leonardo, because we did the Cerebrus Turtle crossover in issue 8. Then we started Leonardo 9, 10, which in the 10 and 11, actually the main ones, to bring it back. And then paid the whole thing off in City of War, which Pete had this crazy idea to. He reads too much, but he saw this thing where they had these certain grub worms that would eat part of an animal and become similar to and take on the habits and the styles and the first line of this animal. So the foot guy fed the rest of what was left of the shredder to these worms and recreated a worm shredder. So that was the thing we did. Return to New York, and then we killed him again, and that was it. And then along comes a cartoon series, and now Shredder everywhere. But he's too fun to write, and the animated series got a little tedious for us because we kept trying to push new characters, new bad guys into the animation series. It just got to be so formulaic, where they would, Shredder would be like, "Curse you guys," and then Bebop said he would mess something up. Yes. Oh, actually, I pointed you first. I'll get you next. Yep.
Can we hear your ice cream kitty voice?
I had to go through this whole method process. Nickelodeon required it, so I had to live with cats for about 2 weeks on the street and practice my meows. And it's like, it was one of those things. So it's a lot of hissing and a lot of sound effects, but it's just basically, it's a cat. You can do some purring and some. We were joking, because we're going to try to get it made in time for the show, but I want to have a t-shirt that says, "I am Ice Cream Kitty." And my wife was going to get one that says, "I'm with Ice Cream Kitty." So maybe next time you see us out there, we'll have something there. So, you have one right there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what inspired you to write Melting Pot?
Say that again?
Melting Pot.
Melting Pot?
Yeah, what inspired you to write that?
What inspired me to do the series?
Yeah.
Well, it was, I did this series called Melting Pot, and it it was funny, it was around the same time I was working, it's a very edgy sci-fi story that I basically wanted to set up a premise that started bad, got worse, and then horribly, and that's what I designed the series on. So it was a lot of these, went back to my roots in heavy metal. I was very inspired in 1977 when I first bought heavy metal and getting to see all these European artists that were doing, Jodorowsky and Mobius and Belial, and people that were doing these fantastic science fiction-based stories. So that was kind of my melting pot, was my homage to heavy metal, sort of gritty sci-fi, edgy stuff. What was funny was, at the same time I was working on this other kids project I developed called Underwear, which is W-H-E-R-E, and it's this very lighthearted sort of Calvin and Hobbes meets Wizard of Oz. So it was sort of like spending days designing melting pot, with like anger, violence, and then underwear, nice. So it's, I guess I'm a Gemini, so I can handle both personalities. So, but it was a fun series, and thanks. Good question. Yes, sir.
The whole thing for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles basically started out as a parody of Frank Miller's Sin City, wasn't it?
It was Frank Miller's, more importantly, it was Frank Miller's Daredevil, but two things kind of coincided. Well, actually, it was like a perfect storm for Peter and I, because we both grew up reading comics, being hugely inspired by Jack Kirby, Wally Wood, and so many artists at the time. So always, both Peter and I like to say, we kind of stand on the shoulders of giants that inspired us to draw. And then there was this real big self-publishing movement around that time in the late 70s to early 80s. Guys like Dave Sim started with Cerebus. And what I loved about Cerebus when I found it in my little comic store was, here's this little aardvark drawn like Barry Smith was drawing Conan, running around, hacking people up and doing all this crazy stuff. And but it went on 300 issues and became this fantastic series. But with Cerebus, it got a lot of notice because, hey, look at this funny animal comic. So Peter and I were fans of comics. We were fans of, X-Men, New Mutants. Frank Miller had come out with Ronin at that time. There were so many exciting things going on in comics, and I was a fan of Daredevil before Frank Miller came along. I still remember when Frank Miller came in and joined the series and blew us all away for 30 issues. So when we sort of had Jack Kirby influence, Commandy was my favorite story, which was all animal characters. Yes, and we had Dave Sim doing Cerebus, New Mutants. So when we did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we just sort of put the best and our favorite bits of all comics and rolled it into one. And then the parody element was kind of like what Dave Sim did with Cerebus, is we just said, let's make the first issue serious but silly, and nobody's going to buy it anyway. So we just had fun with it. So it was parodying our favorite things in comics. So. Yes, sir.
Why didn't you make Leonardo leader?
Why did we?
Yeah.
Well, it was sort of, when we started designing the turtle characters, we sort of based a lot of their personality on the weapons. And so where to us the katana and the swords was sort of a traditional samurai, more very respectful, serious warrior character. They just seemed to be natural for the leader. So Leonardo sort of was all based around the katanas, and Raphael, for example, his eyes are made for close-in fighting and more nastier fighting, I guess. And so with Raphael being sort of our berserker, our Wolverine character, if you will, so that's perfect for him. Nunchucks, you ever use nunchucks? Man, I hit myself so many times. It just seemed like somebody that was going to do something like that might be a little sillier, but master him, so it fit Michelangelo. And then Donatello was our kind of techno, more sort of referee with the other brothers. So this bow staff is sort of a monk's traditional weapon, and even though sometimes guys with a staff can beat guys with swords, but it still it seemed to fit Donatello's personality. So yeah, thanks. Good question. Way in the back over there, you put up there a few times there.
Thank you. The conception for the new movie coming out, is that still from your own image, or did they choose something from another line?
I'm sorry, repeat that again? I'm a little deaf in my old age.
Let me get past that. The conception for the new movie coming out.
Yes.
Is that still from your image, or is it from what they predetermined?
No, it's what they did is when they were designing the story is that they wanted to pick some of their favorite parts of the original series, the original movies, and some of the animated stuff, but still make it its own thing. But they they fully realize how they need to make sure it stays true to the original series and inspired by the original series. So I think and hope a lot of fans will be surprised when it finally comes out that it'll be good and a lot of action and they won't be disappointed. Anybody else? I don't know how much time we got left. Another 2 hours. We got another 2 hours, so ask some more questions. Long ones. Yes. Couple more. And lady?
First of all, thank you so much for coming by from Sacramento. We're very fortunate to have you here.
Thank you.
My question is, with Turtles now being 30 years old, what do you think it is about the Turtles that has made it so popular?
You guys. No, seriously. What's interesting is that you break the story, the Turtles concept down to its basic elements. Is you have a family, and it's sort of a misfit family. And I don't care if it's the way I grew up in the schoolyard or any job that I ever had. It's like that becomes your family. And you have the funny one and the serious one and whatever. And sort of you have this interesting bond. And I think that because they weren't one specific white, black, Asian. They weren't, they were mutants. So I think a lot more people could kind of identify them because I think every kid out there, especially growing up, feels a little bit like they're a misfit, and they want to just find their place to fit in. And then at the same time, it was all of us want to be the hero that saves the day, that does the right thing, that makes the right decision. And that's Turtles' main objective was always to be teenagers first, and eat pizza and just hang, do this, but when things got serious, they were able to protect themselves and protect their brothers and protect their family, and I think that's all we secretly desire to do that, and it's, sort of, I think, just a lot of people could identify to them, and, because we've really thought about it, and it's sort of, over, now it's been 30 years, and every time we've done, a new movie or a new cartoon series, the only thing that's going to make any of those things work and be even remotely a success is if you guys come out and see it and you choose to buy it or be part of it. And so I turn the blame on you and thank you at the same time. So hopefully we're doing a good job because you guys are doing me an awesome job. So actually, him first, then I'll go in the back. Yes, sir.
So going along with the idea of the Mutant Ninja Turtles in space and all that, where did this come from? And I'll mention it right now. And what did you feel about it? The collaboration between Power Rangers Lost in Space and Teenage Mutant Ninja.
That was nuts. It was crazy.
I mean,
it was one of those. It's one of those things that the original idea, because I remember in 1977 going to the theater 5 times to see Star Wars, and that affected me like maybe I just loved it. And Peter was a huge Star Wars fan, so when we had the chance we were looking for the next story arc in the early days of the Turtles. We said, well, what can we do with them now? And we said, well, let's take them into space. Let's do our love poem to George Lucas. And so we did that. And then, as things went on, by the time we did something like the Power Rangers thing, which was more Haim Saban and what they were doing with the live-action Turtle series, we'd already done 300 cartoon shows. I mean, it's like, man, what's left? So you keep trying to look for interesting ideas and ways to reach the audience and stuff like that. And that was probably a bit sillier than we would have liked, but the Power Rangers are still, I did a show this past weekend, and there was as many Power Rangers fans there as there were Turtle fans. It's crazy. It still resonates with fans. So it seemed like a good idea at the time. Thanks. Yes, sir. In the back.
What's your everything you've created? What is your favorite creation? Series and character.
Series and character? I would probably have to go back to series and character. I'd have to go back to Raphael, the Raphael one shot, only because I loved Casey and even I love all the Turtles. I love all the stories that Peter and I did together. I love all the Turtle stories that I've worked on with different artists. When I'm doing stuff on my own, fans notice a lot of the short stories and even some of the long stories I do feature Casey and Raphael as characters because they're really fun to write because they're kind of really goofy and they're like brothers, like like Bob and Doug McKenzie and Strange Brew. They torture each other, but they love each other, and because they're so different, unique, and with Raphael being a little unpredictable, you can take the stories places that you couldn't take. Leonardo wouldn't go along with some of the stuff, or Donatello would, or Michelangelo would. So I feel like there's a more open palette to write a more interesting story for me, and hopefully to you. But so I'd say Raphael's my favorite single issue. Although Turtles #8 with Cerebus was a big favorite of mine, and then the first Turtle movie was first. Who hasn't asked a question yet? One more question? A green shirt right there.
Was it fun? Did you work with Stan Sakai? Was that a ball?
Say that again?
Did you work with Stan Sakai on the Turtles?
Oh my God! Thanks for mentioning Stan, because he is the one of the nicest, one of the coolest, one of the most talented creators and artists that I've ever met. And you should mention that Yusaku and Jimbo was like, we were out there doing shows together. Peter and Stan and I would always sitting in Artist Alley doing sketches for $5 so we could run around and buy comics after the show and stuff. And Stan's going through a bit of a tough time with his wife right now, so it was all, say a prayer, keep our thoughts, stand in our thoughts. But I love Usagi and Jimbo. It was a natural. So when we got a chance to include him in not only the original Turtle animated series and the Turtles comics, and then the animated series, and hopefully we can get it back into the new series, because I know I was talking to Ciro 2 weeks ago about other characters that I wanted to see, and Usagi and Jimbo was on top of his list to try to get involved in the new series. I wanted Flaming Kara too. That's the most goofiest. I love that Turtle series. So I think, are we all set? So thanks you guys. I want to tell you again, I cannot thank you. Thank you again very much for coming out, making me feel so incredibly welcome and having such a great time here in Sacramento, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. But I'm going to use the restroom and I'll be back. I'll wash my hands and we're going to use the restroom, and then I'll see you back on the table for anybody that wants a signature or sketch or something. Thanks again.